And we're live. This is very informal. I'm Sammy K. Powers, joined by Ben Ramsey, Joe Watkins, Sarah Goldman, Nuno Lopez, Raphael Dums, and unfortunately not Elizabeth Smith, but she'll be joining us later in spirit. She's at work. She can't join us. I think the whole idea of this thing is just to do a little PHP TestFest 2017 planning thing. And I have stuff on my list. I know Ben's got stuff on his list. I don't know what, Ben, you want to just... I know you've got a bunch of ideas. You want to start?
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that I wanted to kind of leave this Hangout session with was a general idea of how we're going to proceed from, I guess, the review side of things. So TestFest is this initiative. We have the idea is to get people contributing tests to the PHP core. And as part of that, we want to have prizes and raffles and awards, and we're working on those things along the sides, but we need to come up with the plan for, well, how do people submit these things? How do people submit their test? How do they get included into the TestFest kind of list of people who are contributing, and their contributions go towards their prizes type stuff. So we have to find a way to track all that. And on top of that, I want to make sure that we limit burden on core developers right now. So instead of people just going all willy-nilly and submitting a bunch of pull requests to PHP source on GitHub, and then suddenly core developers looking at that going, what are we doing with all this? Freaking out, maybe not freaking out, but just, we need to have some kind of method here to the madness so that there isn't that kind of a rush, and we don't have, lots of people kind of being burdened. So, oh, Joe's back.
And we can hear him.
I am kind of back, but I'm using my mobile phone. I don't know how good it is.
Oh, it's lovely. You're the best quality here.
Oh, great.
All right.
I think it was a personal statement about you more so than the recording.
So all of that in mind, that kind of sets up where we are here. I want to share just a couple ideas I have about what I think could work, and then I would like feedback from everyone else on here. I know that Joe works on core, Sarah works on core. Nuno, I don't know you, so you'll have to share a little bit about what you do, but I'm guessing you write PHP tests a lot?
Not really. So I used to work on PHP, I don't know, like maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I still maintain the gcov.php.net server, but I haven't done any code for PHP itself for quite a few years now.
Okay. So so you maintain the gcov instance, so that's good to know. All right, because that'll come up in all of this, obviously.
Yeah, I forgot to mention why specifically I brought everybody on. That's why I brought Noodle on for that specific reason.
Okay, so let me just kind of talk through what I'm thinking, and this is all rough. This is all just stuff I've been putting together in my head over the last couple weeks now. Nothing is set in stone. The first thing I've been thinking about is, well, just at a high level, what I was thinking of is taking PHP source on GitHub, creating a fork of that. In fact, I've not created a fork. I've actually created a separate complete repository because I found out that if you fork a repo and you've already forked the parent repo, you can't fork a child repo of that parent repo for some reason. So if anyone already has PHP source forked on GitHub, then they would not be able to fork this repo, which was kind of unfortunate. But it actually
that's a name conflict, surely. Like because it's called PHP source, we could call it something else.
I changed the name of it, and it still wouldn't let me do it. So,
well, fine though. Like it's simple enough to just create.
Yeah. So it's simple enough. Those are technical things. So the idea here is to have a separate repository with separate branches, and I've actually gone ahead, and I'll just share this link in here so you can see what I've done. This is, where is it? Okay. So this is at github.com/php-community/php-testfest-php-src. And what I've done here is I've only got 3 branches in here, and they map to the branches in the main PHP source repository for PHP 7.0, PHP 7.1, and PHP 7.2. Those are the main base branches for those 3 versions, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. I'm just curious why you don't have master on there.
I didn't put master on here, and maybe that is a thing that I need to put on here. So we can talk about that in a minute.
There should be relatively few tests that only apply to 7.3 dev, but I mean, there may be some. So just
okay. So the general idea, though, and again, Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're doing development that is going to target 7.0, you do it against the PHP 7.0 branch, and then it's going to get merged up into 7.1 and 7.2 and into master, right?
Yeah, that's the case, but I almost think that because of the way you've set this up, where we sort of had this shadow version of PHP source, like we don't even necessarily need to worry about the merging up at this stage. We can do that as a post-process thing when we say, okay, here's all of our 7.0 fixes. Let's get them in. Let's merge them forward. Now here's all our 7.1s. Get them in, merge them forward, et cetera.
Okay. Okay.
So we don't necessarily have to worry about our usual merging strategy for this. Although maybe it's a good idea because we could have tests that collide with each other. I don't know.
Okay.
Question mark.
So I think you're kind of getting the gist of where I'm going with this, though. But the idea here is that we would have separate branches just for TestFest. People can open up pull requests against these branches. This is an easy and clean way for us to keep track of these submissions. I'll need volunteers to help review these PRs, and then as part of kind of a way of keeping track of these things, I'm thinking about building, and I've already kind of taken a few steps towards it, but building a separate application that you could log in using your GitHub account. It would do the OAuth redirect, and then use the GitHub API to say, here are your PRs that you have submitted to the repo, and also the ability for those users to kind of set what user group they're a member of, and also that gives us kind of an idea, like admins could go in and then see, all right, here's all the people who have submitted contributions. Here's how many pull requests each one has submitted. We want to maintain that each pull request would be one test. We don't want to do multiple tests per pull request, mainly just for the sake of keeping track of how many tests each person is contributing. And also we could see all the groups and how many people are contributing for each group, how many pull requests are coming in for each group. We could see what pull requests have been approved, not necessarily merged, but we can talk about those specifics in a minute, how we would want to handle that. But basically a dashboard that says, here's all the people participating, here's all their pull requests, here's whether a reviewer has said this pull request looks good or not, and then we could use that in the future for, I want to try to raffle prizes to everyone. I want to try to track who is a brand new contributor, has never contributed into PHP source, and those kinds of things.
So Ben,
yeah, go ahead.
Quick question. You mentioned 1 PR per test. So I remember last TestFest having averages of 51 tests.
Yeah.
Are we worried about how much overhead we're adding with each PR? Because then comes with the description, everything is.
So the end result or the end goal here is that we could manage these contributions, and we get reviewers who know what they're doing. Obviously, we manage these contributions all kind of in a lump sum, and then we can go from here, merge them into our PHP TestFest branches, and then from there, once we've kind of said like these are good, we make a pull request against PHP source with it. So they all go in. Everyone gets their their commit credit too. So we're not losing any of that. We're not going to squash anything down. But at that point, it kind of goes all in one big lump. But
I was thinking if you do like one commit per test, then you can still have one PR where you're sending in 7 tests, as opposed to having to open one PR for everyone, and it's still somewhat manageable from programming. Looking into a thing and saying, okay, well, there are 5 commits in this PR, which means you have 5 entries into the raffle and kind of stuff.
right.
It adds a little bit more complication, but yeah.
Oh, was Joe trying to say something?
When it comes to actually merging things back to PHP, like real PHP source, I would say don't worry too much about what's a single PR or multiple PRs, because if you've got your TestFest PHP 7.2 branch and there's 50 different commits on there, like that, leave that range alone. I will go and pull in both remotes and I'll say, okay, give me all diffs from here to here, cherry pick them over, and then like as 7.2 RM, I'll take care of making that happen. And I'm sure Joe as 7.1 RM will make sure of taking care of those happens, and we'll find somebody to do the 7.0s.
Joe, we can't. You're muted.
I muted him a while back ago, and I think he's been trying to unmute himself the whole time, and I can't unmute him for some reason. It's disabled. Sorry.
Can you type what you need to say? Oh, you're on your phone. That's even worse.
I think you can only unmute yourself once someone has muted you, but there should be like a
Can you
little.
hear me?
There you go.
Okay, so what I was going to say is new tests are not normally merged into the lowest branch. They're normally just merged into master.
Okay.
That is an excellent point.
Tests that are being fixed, I mean, pull them into the appropriate branch, but new tests should really only go in master.
Okay, I see. So for an existing bug fix, we would go into the appropriate branch, but for most all new tests go into master. Okay.
Yeah. About massive commits. I mean, it's no problem. We all know the commands to do it, but it is nicer when a pull request is only focused on one thing, because you need people to review that. And if someone comes along and sees 50 changed files, I mean, they're not so inclined to review it. But they see one.
Well, GitHub, you can actually you can review commit by commit, so it wouldn't be that much of an overload if each commit is one test, right? You're like, okay, this is good, next, this is good, next, until you get to the end.
And I think the problem though is if they find a test that's not good,
then we've got a block on all them other commits.
Yeah.
Because we're not gonna like go through the pulling in commits from PRs. We're just gonna want to merge PRs.
That's a fair point. You're blocking the entire commit. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it would be better if they were not. I mean, maybe not single, but I mean related and quite small, as small as possible is better for us, really.
I think one test per PR is fine, personally.
and from
It's quite reasonable.
Yeah.
from the standpoint of keeping track of them as well through the GitHub API, I don't know that I'd be able to tell that one commit from another commit are 2 different tests either. That's the other reason for this.
Yeah, it would be an honor game, right? I mean, you're honoring the fact that each commit is a different test, but then you're relying on that.
True.
But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, we can. I mean, it's just an overhead of creating a PR. We can probably try and abstract some of that away anyway.
I would, however, say that commits that are being put up against the TestFest repo, like they should already be squashed down to a single commit per PR, because when we merge things into the real PHP tree, we're going to want a single commit per PR that goes into that. We're not going to want a history of like, oh, fixed typo and things like that. So the PRs that individual people put up against PHP TestFest repos should be in a state that they'd be ready to be merged to the real repo.
So what you mean is the end result of one PR is one commit with the state that you want, and not here's a test, fix a typo, did something else.
Yeah.
Like you squash them into a single commit. So rebasing into one single commit at the end, essentially.
Yeah, because when we go to the real PHP source, we don't want to have to deal with that work at that point.
It doesn't make sense to carry all the typo fix. So it's
Exactly,
one commit, one PR, one commit, one test.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Ein.
All right. I mean, it sounds like that. Is there any other feedback on what I've kind of presented at a high level? Does anything sound missing, or did you have any other ideas that you think might be a better approach?
Nothing comes to mind. I think I mean, there's a bit of work there to be done, but I think that would give us the platform to be able to do this. And I think it's similar to what we did in 2009, because there was a separate separate place where we did all of the tests. Then they went into actual PHP, and I think that works great.
Yeah, honestly, Ben,
too.
what you described was exactly what I had in mind coming into this conversation. So, I mean, I'm all for that.
Awesome.
It allows us to use GitHub tools the way they're meant to be used, and we can just say merge right there on the PR. We don't have to worry about PHP's weird process with get.phpnet until we go to the final merge, and then that'll be a single shot.
Awesome. I think we lost Joe there.
No.
I didn't know what that noise was.
Somebody on the Isle of Wight picked up the telephone, and that knocked their internet off.
Joe's
back.
Yeah, I missed that last bit.
I was
just that we were agreeing on the plan.
We said Joe was going to do it all.
Well, so I guess this would be good to talk about two things. One is the quality of the tests. I want to make a follow-up video to my screencast series about, like, specifically, I've had some requests for, like, well, most of the low-hanging fruit is gone as far as just finding these untested functions, but, like, how do we get down and dirty and, like, test these lines of code that need to be tested, or finding bugs, or, like, finding useful tests, and maybe talking about quality of tests, not testing ZPP and things like that. And then also bringing in Nuno onto this part of what are we tracking specifically, lines of code, or if it's just tests or our analytics. So whichever one of those.
Yeah, I'll start, and then I want to hear other people's input, much more than just me talking on this. I've given a lot of thought to how to like what are the measurements? What are the end goals here? Joe and I have had some email communication about this too, and ultimately it came out of, I think Cal Evans had asked, well, what's your metric for tracking success? And I said, well, I don't know what the metric is right now. Ultimately, I want my goal is to introduce other people who aren't aware of how to write tests for PHP to how to write tests for PHP, and that is another avenue into being able to participate and contribute to the project. If you're not a C coder, that's a way to get involved. Documentation is also a way to get involved, but this is another way. I think that I've changed some of the wording on the website to reflect those goals a little better. Ultimately, I can track new contributors much more easily than I can track anything else, because I can look at GitHub and tell whether you are a new contributor and have ever contributed to this repo before. I know that that's not entirely foolproof, but there are ways to do it. But if we're tracking code coverage, the metric there is just not going to be easy to figure out. New lines of code covered, those kinds of things. Also, and Joe, I wanted to hear more from you on this too, but you mentioned robustness. And so I'd like to understand, like, is there a way to track what that means so that, maybe we've got a different metric than just new contributors?
So before Joe answers that, I just want to throw in some thoughts I had about what you were saying. Sammy mentioned that there were going to be some degree of prizes, or raffles or something for contributors. I think some kind of a point system might be useful there. Like, you get a point for a commit, whatever you do. If you've added to code coverage in some meaningless way, whatever, you get a point. Maybe one extra point for if it's your first time, just to encourage new people to come and give them some kind of a leg up. But I think more importantly, extra points for really meaningful tests. and we could maybe track that through something like the number of times that a judge or whatever hits the love emoji on the PR or something like that to indicate like somebody said, hey, this is a really useful test. And we, 2 extra points for every one of those you get or something like that. So some way to encourage people to give us quality tests rather than quantity tests.
I like that, yeah. I hadn't even thought about a point system. That's good.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
So sorry, I interjected that, but I'll pop off the stack and let you answer the question Ben asked.
That completely I think that solves a lot of issues right there. It comes up with it's a much better way to measure that. I think there are some subjectivity to it, but there's also a bit of objectivity because you've got someone who knows about tests reviewing that and saying, I love this test. It is meaningful. Then you get a point for each test. You get a point for being a new contributor. Those are all good ways to measure these things. I think that's good.
It makes sense because sometimes you're not adding a new test. You're adding a new test scenario to an existing test. So this helps you track that a little bit better.
Right? Yeah. One thing I would say is maybe another way to robustness is obviously a fluffy term. It doesn't really mean anything. What I'm thinking is some tests are actually going to find bugs in PHP. You're actually going to be testing something and you're not going to get what you expect. So rather than just writing the test, although you could also open a bug report, and then if that gets fixed by you or someone else, maybe you could give them some more points with Sarah's point-based idea. But no, robustness, I can't really defend the use of that. But what I'm thinking is I just don't want to merge a bunch of tests that are testing code that's already tested. Like I mentioned ZPP in particular, but obviously coverage is not exact, and it'll report that a line like one that has ZPP on it is not covered, even though it is 1,000 times over, just because of that's how code coverage works. So code coverage is a good thing to look at, but it's not the only thing. You also actually want to be solving problems, finding bugs, telling us about problems, and all those things are useful as well. Even if you go to change a test, add some coverage to a test, and you find a bug, obviously you have to wait for someone to fix the bug before your test gets merged. But you should still get credit if you go and open a bug report, because we need to know about it. So yeah.
Should they still submit the test and that's failing?
Yeah, they could even use there's like xfail, which Samuel, I mean, you're sure you know about. There is ways to mark the test as expected to fail, but and yeah, you could do that while the PR is originally open. But we would hope that someone will fix it before you actually have to merge it. But yeah, you can use xfail and Travis will stay green. So that's
it does mean that we're going to have to rely a lot more on the core developers to validate some of these scenarios. If the test is really that good or not. I mean, for example, I can't tell all of it because I don't know the source code as well as most of you, all of you, any of you at this point. So we would then rely a lot more on you, Sarah, and other core contributors to be able to give a little bit more of a, okay, well, this test does something extra which we should validate, right?
Yeah, but I mean, once we see all the effort that's been made, and we're going to obviously just offer up time to do whatever's necessary. We all spend quite a bit of time reading pull requests and that. I mean, we're getting good at that. So I shouldn't worry about the demands you're making of core contributors, really.
Yeah. So let me just second this point, because I mean, in some of the previous test fests, we had a rush to create a lot of tests. So because the incentive was, to create a lot of new files, and this is a bit of a waste because a lot of small tests take a long time to run, and also just checking that everything is fine is not that useful. So I would give extra brownie points for actually finding bugs and filling bug reports. I mean, that's where the value is. I mean, just creating some stupid test that is 3 lines just for the sake of, I have a new test. It's not that useful, I think.
Should we also try and include in that improving existing tests? So
That's what
maybe
I was
making
gonna
it
mention.
so they can run faster, use less resources, or whatever.
Or just delete crappy ones.
Even deleting duplicated tests is a useful thing. Or
When people start opening pull requests and they'll start looking at Travis, because we use Travis now, they're going to notice that there's a few tests that make it fail intermittently, and they're the sort of candidates that you want to look to improve because they're obviously broken tests. It's not broken code, it's just the test is written bad, like there's some problem with concurrency or something like that, and the test intermittently fails. But it's not a problem in PHP, it's just a problem in the text. There's quite a few of them.
Is there a list of just definitive, like, I guess this is how we're going to name tests, this is how the test should include, this is what the test should include, and then just if we get like just sort of this guide that's like if it's named the wrong way, if it's got too long of a name on the test description, like is there just a big list of things we could give people to just go there and like find existing tests that don't fit within that, and then have that as a way for them to contribute as kind of that low-hanging fruit for people who maybe don't feel comfortable getting really deep into the nitty-gritty of things?
You find some extensions just number their tests, and some bits of Zend have got names, but others are numbers. So if you just do whatever's around, do whatever you're working in, follow the pattern. Try to write useful descriptions rather than making really complicated file names. Just write a decent description, and that should be that.
So basically, follow the pattern for the file naming for whatever extension you're working in.
Yeah.
Although I would just add that only having numbers is cringeworthy, and if you see 2 patterns in the neighborhood, follow the one that's not just numbering.
Well, I mean, I don't want to argue about this, but if you're writing an extension, I developed some quite great ones, and if numbering them runs them in order, so that when it starts fading, sometimes it makes sense to run them in a specific order because it leads you to the problem quicker. So I can see why some people use numbers, but I am aware that everyone hates it. But I'm going to continue to do it, and I think it's defensible.
Number plus short description, then. Yeah. But you're right. Let's not argue about this. This is such a fight. Close that down.
To be fair, I'm probably to blame for a bunch of those numbers because that's what the pattern we followed in 2009. So it was first test for this function, second test for this function, third test for this function, and yeah, it made me cringe. I think there was a better way of doing that back then, but I didn't
Honestly,
know.
I'm not going to turn down a test if my only complaint is that it has a dumb name. Like, that's not, Yeah.
Oh, you're so much better than our code reviews. We would reject that.
Would refactoring a test to make it more readable or breaking it up into smaller tests be acceptable?
No smaller tests, no.
I think code motion for the sake of a concept of purity is probably not a goal. The diffs should add something useful.
Would you have a list of tests that you think, okay, this is exactly what we need more of, or exactly what we need less of? Because that would be a good motivation to give people, like, oh, look, if you have to write 5 things about this thing, write them all, because it varies a bit from the PHP unit approach, where you want, you know, one test to have one assertion, whereas here you actually want the test to maybe do a little bit more and cover a little bit more scenarios. So if we had a couple of these examples, it might be easy to showcase people, like, this is what we're looking for, this is what you should aim for.
I don't know that we have those examples, and maybe Joe will correct me, but PHP's current test volume is just a lot of unplanned code spew, and a lot of it tests really good things, but some of it tests really dumb things, and it just
So the question is, which one do you want more of now? If we're going to let the world loose on this, do you want more or more better?
I want more tests that will actually catch, that actually stand a chance of catching some kind of meaningful regression. If the test is, hey, I pass string to a function expecting an array, I want to make sure I get an error. No, that's not an exciting test. That's just what Joe was talking about with more ZPP checks. We don't need more ZPP checks. And we have a lot of them.
So should we include refactoring run tests into this whole thing, or is that shouldn't be touched?
I would love to see run tests refactored, but no, we really shouldn't.
That's a
I can
completely
give you
different
some
project.
history about that.
Yeah.
So, like 10 years ago, IBM started a project to to rewrite run tests. And after like a year, they failed because, you know, it's not documented anywhere. And so they never managed to get 100% equivalence with all the run tests. So I don't think we should do that. So it's it's a long project. What I would like to have, though, is multi-threaded support in run tests. And I wrote a patch in 2007. So, okay, so 10 years ago. I can show you here.
I do think improving run tests is an honorable and worthwhile goal. I just don't think it should align with TestFest.
Right. I think that's a good point. So I think it's not very hard to make run tests be multi-threaded. So I have this patch, so it works almost. So the only thing it doesn't is, you know, there are some extensions that use shared libraries, like, for example, MySQL and PDO MySQL, for example. You don't want to run them in parallel because they might be hitting the same database. So you need kind of to blacklist interactions between extensions, but that's pretty easy. I mean, there are not that many. But besides that, you know, running tests in parallel should be easy.
I don't know when the last time you did that was, but HHVM did a bunch of upstream diffs. Okay, I did a bunch of upstream diffs as part of HHVM to make sure that tests could run in parallel. So we should be at a pretty nice state for being able to run in parallel right now. I would look at HHVM's test runner because it does have a few explicit blacklists like you're talking about. It's just like, no, we can't fix these tests. They're just what they are and they have to be run serially. But those even are listed like in a nice single spot. You're just like, oh, here's the problems. Da, 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 da.
Okay. Yeah, but I would assume that, for example, running OCI and PDO, OCI, whatever, I don't know. It seems safer to not run them in parallel because, you know, something may happen. But anyway, so giving multi-thread support would be pretty good, both for the GCOV service and for developers, you know, because it would cut the testing time by maybe 8. So that would be pretty good.
But that's, so we're saying don't touch it for this project though, right?
Yeah, I would not do it for TestFest.
Yeah, cool.
I'd maybe list it as, you know, a future opportunity,
right?
For, you know, more adventure people, but, you know, not now.
For sure. So, and adding docs, I know, like, for example, libsodium's coming down the pipe and doesn't have any documentation. Should we at least mention that, or say here's other ways to get involved if you like tests, but they don't necessarily count towards TestFest.
So
I think
Websodium is kind of an awkward thing because it does have documentation in its own repo in a different format. So we needed to even decide there, how much duplication do we want between their documentation and ours? Personally, I
Right.
think if it's a bundled
It needs to
extension,
have
it should be on our
documentation in the
manual.
manual.
Sorry, what, Joe?
It does need to have documentation in the manual.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree with that. But like to the extent of how much of that documentation we need to duplicate versus just copy it over, that sort of thing.
Like give it a document the API in PHP, say here's the TLDR of what it does, and here's the link to it for more info if you want to dive deeper kind of thing.
Perhaps. I'm not sure what that looks like exactly. But I just want to mention that there is documentation. It's just not in our manual.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, generally what happens just before a release is the doc team will actually get on it and start reading through upgrading and news, and they'll start documenting the things that aren't there. So that will eventually happen, but it happens like late. So if by September, we're still in the position that we're in now, maybe it would be time. Maybe it would be time to start encouraging people to work on stuff that's missing. But it will start though. It just magically starts just after it should.
don't they have a some kind of documentation generator that'll take the doc?
Yeah, there's a tool that goes for those proto lines you see all over
Right, so
source,
it'll
and
just
it makes
grab-
stubs.
It'll just make stubs that will document the API only.
Right, but
basically.
given that there is sort of that practice of like not even getting that documentation until the release is nearly ready, maybe documentation is something best saved for TestFest Winter Edition.
Well, what I'd like to do, I mean, yeah, to go back to your question, Sammy, I'd love for TestFest to be something that, we can point people in other directions, say, hey, if you're interested in contributing in other ways, here are some other ways. I know that the documentation team have in the past done a few similar things to TestFest. I don't think it, I don't know if it, I'm trying to remember, and my memory is not serving me well, but I think they've done something similar in the past. I know that comes up every few years, some initiative to want to rework documentation so that it can go into a GitHub repo because it's still in Subversion, but there's a lot of challenges around that.
Oh, the biggest challenge
Yeah, it's not trivial to
nasty
contribute.
XML files. And no one wants to work on horrible XML.
Well, also,
no one really understands it.
because of the way Subversion is set up, all of the language directories are just subdirectories, and you can just pull down each one. And so the question is, does it go into a GitHub repo where there's submodules, and how does that work, and all that mess? So
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, if you wanted places to point people, documentation.
Row.
oh no.
He's just thinking.
He's lost in thought.
Can someone go reboot Joe, please?
That's a hell of a pose for him to be in, though. It looks very epic.
Oh no, we lost him.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I kind of wanted to ask Joe and Sarah specifically if I were to kind of create one final sort of video for the screencast of writing tests for PHP source on specifically making sure that your test is good quality. Do you have any good just tips that I could go through that would I should definitely make sure to point other than like don't test CPP. Make sure it's not necessarily like adding value somehow.
Yeah, so tips. I mean, number one, make sure it's meaningful. Number two, like think about your own experiences. Like what stuff have you run into where something has done something unexpected? And is there a way to sort of channel that into a test? That doesn't necessarily equate to bugs, but it does equate to understanding that something deterministically does what you expect it to do every time. Look at code coverage, but code coverage is not an end goal. Code coverage just tells you big gaping places where, hey, there's only 2% of functions in the Informix extension are tested. If you can get that running, get them tested. Yeah. There's no such thing as a bad test to submit. You might get told it's a bad test once it arrives, but that'll at least help start a conversation so that we can help you understand what is a good test. That's all I got.
Cool. So did you have any other thoughts on, I don't know if you have any audio, but on what would make a good test, just like some thoughts on, oh yeah, we don't hear you. Oh no, we can see you. You could just use facial expressions to express the good kind of tests you're looking for. Well, while Joe is working on the sound, what about going back to the point system, just to kind of maybe wrap up a little bit? I know I don't want to take too much everybody's time, but on the point system, is there going to be how deep are we going to get into that rabbit hole? Because we could have badges, gamification, like leaderboards, and all kinds of craziness. Like how is that going to necessarily be tracked? And are we just talking about an Excel sheet, on somebody's computer, or something that's more dynamic?
Well, I definitely think that there are some ways that we can track things. As I was talking about, I'm working on putting together some application that'll run, and you can log in with your GitHub account and track your individual PRs to this repo. I think that in those cases, some of these points can be more or less automated, and like 1 point for each PR maybe. If one of the reviewers thinks it's needs extra points for being a meaningful test, maybe we use labels or something like that that they can apply. So there's some ways we can do that without having a lot of overhead and keeping track of it. What I think I'm going to do is just put together this list that we've already kind of talked about, and maybe a few others that I've got in my head for points, and just open up a new thread on the Google group about the point system. I'll try to do that today, and maybe we can get some discussion going on, what other things we can add points to, how we can apply them. We want to try to apply them in a way that they're fair, and we're not, people aren't just like throwing out points like it's midnight, like the show At Midnight, or Whose Line Is It Anyway? But because the points here matter. Yeah, we'll have some thoughts on that. I think I think that we have some ways we can work through that.
So on the one hand, I'm almost not worried about people gaming the system, because if we have weighted things properly, where again meaningful good tests are awarded more points, then that means people are going to write better, more meaningful points.
Yeah.
Although if we offer 1 point for any old damn test, then that kind of gamifies in the other direction. But
maybe,
yeah. Well, perhaps on the other side of it, we can sort of award raffle prizes sort of focused on other things. Like we have one that's, hey, here's a prize for just being super productive and creating a bunch of tests, but here's another one for like only focusing on people that had at least 3 meaningful tests, or some sort of way to, I don't know how deep you want to go with that. It could get pretty messy, pretty ugly, pretty fast.
So instead of just tracking points, well, I mean, we should probably track the points and have this one way of raffling stuff, but also have more of at the end of all of it, a award ceremony kind of thing, right? Where we can go look at everything that came in and start picking out some interesting situations, or like, oh, this person, like, you wrote all the tests for this one little thing, or this person tried to cover all of this.
Oh yeah, that's that's good. Yeah,
do a little bit of a human part of it as well. Most test with the most lines.
Curated, like a curated award. So that,
oh god.
Yeah. What?
I'm getting this visual of like actual award ceremony style. Like we dress up, bring out some cards, and the award for the most test goes to. Bad image.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Exactly.
Hey, as
Like
long
to
as we
thank the
get the
TestFest.
right winner, we should be good. As long as we don't give the prize to someone else, we should be good.
And the award goes to Brazil. No, fuck that country.
Get off stage, Brazil. Well, I have here the envelope. See, and the award goes to a bill. Yes, a bill is great.
But yeah, I think we got some good ideas here for
Absolutely.
for how to raffle off prizes and award prizes. I think we've got a great kind of way to proceed on maybe how to track this and where to submit and how we're going to deal with that. I think what I need to do next is I'll need to solicit for volunteers to be reviewers. And so, Sarah and Joe, I'd love for you to volunteer to be a reviewer. But I also want to grab some other people. So if you have other people in mind that you think would be great for that role, then let me know, and I'll ping them too. And so I'm going to be working on this. I'll probably open up a public repository for this app that will help people log in and track their submissions. And then I think really the next thing is once we kind of get a little bit more description around how this will all work, we work with user groups and share these details. And
right.
I know Andreas Heigl had wanted to put together maybe a hangout to talk about just leading a group through a TestFest event. And so once maybe I'll send around some messages and maybe try to put something like that together next week.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's really helpful, and maybe even have like a follow-up screencast of specifically how to contribute specifically and get counted for TestFest, because it sounds like they might have to commit to a specific repo and might have to register it at the website, or just ironing out all those details and just making it more explicit. So
yep.
Yeah, for sure. Just let me know.
I definitely appreciate you putting this together, Sammy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for you and everyone who else is in here, because you're all doing things and stuff. And this is yours, Joe, by the way. I got to get this to you. So yeah, he's looking really excited. All right. Well, that's all I have on my stuff. Anybody have anything else?
Not me.
Even if Joe does have something else, he can't say anything, so it doesn't matter.
He just sealed his lips.
So Sammy, what do you have in mind for prizes? Because I could probably like add some elephants or something to the prize pool or something.
So I have a list right here. Hold on.
Ben's been in charge of that stuff.
Let me.
Okay, then Ben. What's up, Wild Garlic Sleeve?
Actually, I'm looking for someone to take over leadership of that. I think, and I don't want to commit him to it right now, but I think Karate has said that he's interested in taking charge of that. But where is it? It is somewhere in here. Google Groups, the page you just requested is invalid. What?
Yeah, no, I did remember Kirati volunteering, asking if remotely he could do that. And as soon as we have a centralized position, then I wanna also start poking people. Starting with the user group sponsors and then going down the line. And I think if everyone who runs a user group starts poking their sponsors and pointing them at the same person, I think we can get a good fair list of prizes.
So we've got, I'm not going to name prizes right now, but I'll just tell some people who are involved. Rogue Wave and Nomad PHP. Taylor Otwell has offered up a prize. WebSec.io, that's Chris Cornett's project, is offering up a prize. Mark Baker is offering one of the large infis, or infis, or however you pronounce it. That's all I've got right now.
Well, you can add Amsterdam PHP to that list, but I'll get you the details.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna check with Karate on that and just make sure he's all good, and I'll get him access to. I've got a special sponsors at phptestfest.org mailing list, so I'm gonna add him to that so that he can see all those things, and that's really where we want everyone to send email to that, just so we've got it in one place and not all through Twitter DMs and other messaging.
Cool.
True that. All right. Now that Joe can officially talk, I think we're all going to leave.
I like how we have two Joes and they're all in different positions.
It's like Quantum Joe.
I am a Quantum Joe.
All right. Well, I guess we'll all be in touch at certain points to talk about our things that we're doing with each other and making things happen. So thanks everybody for your time. It's good to get everybody on the same page, on the same boat, and in the same chat room.
Thank you all for joining.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.